The wind here has a memory. Before it touches the skin, it has traveled thousands of miles across the restless, heaving expanse of the Atlantic, gathering the scent of deep salt and cold, uncharted depths. It funnels through the narrow gap between two continents, a place Thinsians called the Pillars of Hercules, where the great ocean meets the calm, turquoise embrace of the Mediterranean Sea. Even today, if you stand on the high cliffs of the southern tip of Europe, you can feel the weight of that air. It is heavy with moisture, carrying the invisible dust off Africa and the salt spray of a sea that has witnessed the passage of countless civilizations. The water below is a churning tapestry of dark indigo and frothy white, a volatile meeting place of currents that pull and push with the strength of the tides. There is a stillness in the distance, a deceptive calm where the silhouette of the opposing coast rises like a sleeping giant from the mist. This is the threshold of worlds. For centuries, this narrow strip of water was not a barrier, but a bridge, a liquid road traveled by Phoenician traders, Roman galleys, and Vandals seeking new lands. The sun here sets with a particular brilliance, casting long, melancholic shadows that stretch across the waves, turning the whitecaps into fleeing ghosts of light. It is a place of endings and beginnings, where the known world on sea stopped, and the great mystery of the ocean began. In the year 711, the air was filled with Thesum salt, the same rhythmic crashing of waves against the limestone cliffs, but the silent thathing over the Iberian Peninsula was about to be broken by a new sound, a sound that would weave a melody of culture, science, and beauty that would echo for 800 years. Welcome to the unseen archives, where the forgotten stories of history are brought to life on a calm, immersive narrative. Drift along with us as we weave the threads of the past into a tapestry of sound and vision. Whether you are here to learn, to relax, or to fall into a deep, restorative sleep, let the modern world fade away. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and let us step back into the river of time together. To understand the world that was about to be born, we must first walk through the world that was fading. Imagine the landscape of Iberia in the early 8th century. It is a land of rugged, undeniable beauty, scorched by a relentless sun and cooled by the mountain winds. Their skeleton of the Roman Empire still lies draped across the hills and valleys, visible but weary, great stone aqueducts, their archers, marching like stone giants across the dry plains, still carry water to dusty towns, though the masonry is chipped and covered in creeping ivy. The roads, straight as arrows and paved with enduring determination, cut through forests of cork oak and vast, silvery groves of olive trees. These trees are ancient, their trunks twisted into gnarled shapes by centuries of wind, their leaves shivering in the heat, flashing silver and green like opals on a pond. The earth here is red and thirsty. It cracks under the summer heat, waiting for the brief violent storms of autumn. In the silence of the countryside, life moves at the pace of the seasons. Farmers, dressed in rough tunics of unbleached wool, guide wooden plows pulled by slow, patient oxen. The soil turns over in heavy clods, revealing the dark, fertile richness hidden beneath the dust. The air smells of wild thyme, crushed rosemary, and the resinous scent often needles baking on the forest floor. It is a sensory landscape of harsh textures and resilient. The buzzing of cicadas is a constant, droning backdrop, a sound that seems to vibrate in the heat itself, rising and falling in a hypnotic rhythm that lulls the mind into a trance. Deep in the valleys, the rivers, the Tagus, the Guadalquivir flow sluggishly, their waters muddy and thick. They are the lifelines of this land, winding through the terrain like veins. Along their banks the remnants of Visigothic rule hold sway. The cities are fortified, their walls built thick to withstand sieges. But inside, the grandeur of Rome has dimmed. The marble statues that answer graced the forums are now weathered, their features smoothed by time and rain. The great bathhouses, once the centers of social life and hygiene, stand cold and empty, their hypocaustellant, their pools filled with drifted leaves and rainwater. There is a sense of waiting in the air, a feeling of a world paused between breaths. The Visigothic kings rule from their high halls, surrounded by intrigue and the clinking of iron swords, but out in the vast expanse of Thebes, the people look to the horizon and wonder what lies beyond the sea. Across the strait, on the northern tip of Africa, the atmosphere is different. In the city of Tangier, the air is thick with the scent of spices that have traveled from the deep east: cardamom, cinnamon, and the sharp tang of cumin. The light here seems golden, filtering through the dust off the desert that lies to the south. The sounds are denser, more layered. The call to prayer rise from the minarets, weaving through the noise of the markets where merchants haggle over bolts of silk and baskets of dates. Here the energy is not of fading glory, but of rising momentum. Thermes of the Umayyad Caliphate have swept across North Africa, bringing with them a new faith, a new language, and a hunger for the horizon. But let us not focus on the armies yet. Let us focus on the water that separates these two worlds, that it is a narrow strip, barely 9 miles wide at its tightest point. On a clear day you can see tea houses on the other side, tiny white specks against the green and brown of the hills. For Thepi Pool of Tangier, Iberia is not a myth. It is a neighbor, a constant presence on the skyline, a blue shadow that promises cooler winds and greener lands. The water between is treacherous, known for sudden fogs that roll in like walls of white wool, obscuring the sun and confusing the most experienced sailors. The currents are strong, pulling ships eastward, always eastward, into the heart of the Mediterranean. Imagine standing on the deck of a small wooden vessel in the harbor of Tangier. The wood under your feet is rough-hewn cedar, smelling of pitch and tar. The boat rocks gently, a cradle motion that soothes the nerves. Around you, the preparations are not frantic, but deliberate. Men air-loading crates of supplies, dried figs, leather skins filled with fresh water, sacks of hard grain. There is the clatter of weapons, yes, but also the rustle of parchment. For this is a civilization that values the written word as much as the drawn sword. The sails above are furled heavy, canvas-stained by the elements, waiting for the command to unfurl and catch the westerly breeze. The leader of this expedition is Tariq ibn Ziyad. History will paint him as a conqueror, a man of war, but in this moment, standing at the prow of his ship, let us imagine him as an explorer. He, Isa Berber, a man of the mountains of North Africa, accustomed to the high, thin air and thoroughed terrain. He looks across the water not with anger, but with curiosity. His eyes, narrowed against the glare of the sun on the water, trace the line of the opposite coast. He sees the great rock that will one day bear his name, Jebel Tariq, Gibraltar, rising sheer and grey from the sea. It looks like a sentinel, a guardian of the gate. He wonders what trees grow in its shadow, what birds nest in its crevices, what springs bubble up from its roots. The sun begins to dip lower, turning the sky into a bruised purple and deep orange. The water reflects these colors, transforming from blue to a shimmering, liquid copper. The command is given in a low voice, passed down the line of ships. Oars dip into the water with a unified splash, breaking the surface tension. The sound is rhythmic: splash, creak, pull, splash, creak, pull. It is a hypnotic heartbeat that drives the fleet forward. They move out of the harbor, leaving Theosophy of the African coast behind. The sounds of the city, the barking dogs, the crying children, the iron bells fade away, replaced by the vast enveloping sound of the open sea. Night falls over the strait. The sky above is a dome of infinite black, scattered with stars so bright they seem to hum with energy. The Milky Way is a smear of diamond dust, a river of light that mirrors the dark water below. The moon rises, a sliver of pearl, casting a pale, ghostly path across the waves. In the darkness, the men on the ships are silent. They wrap themselves in their cloaks against the damp chill. The only sound is the water rushing past the hull, a ceaseless, rushing whisper. It is a time for thinking, for dreaming. They are leaving the known for the... They are suspended between continents, floating in a void of water and night. As the hours pass, the rhythm of the ocean changes. The swells become longer, deeper. The air grows cooler, losing the dry heat of the desert and picking up the scent of damp earth and pinaresin from the approaching land. The dawn approaches slowly. It begins as a lightening of the eastern horizon, a bleeding of grey into the black. Then, a line of pale pink appears, widening, pushing back the stars. The silhouette of the great rock of Gibraltar becomes sharper. It looms high above them, a massive wall of limestone that seems to block out the sky. The landing is not a storming of beaches. It is a quiet arrival. The keels of the boats, scrappy against sand and pebble. Men jump into the shallow surf, the cold water shocking their legs, waking them from the trance of the crossing. They wade ashore, dragging the boats up onto their narrow strip of beach at the foot of the rock. The sand here is grey and coarse. The sound of their boots on the dry land is heavy and solid, a stark contrast to the fluid motion of the sea. They have arrived. This place, this foothold on the edge of Europe, feels ancient. The cliffs tower above, home to colonies of grain. They sit in circles, warming their hands, speaking in hushed tones. They are on the precipice of history, but for now, they are just men on a beach, drying their clothes, eating their breakfast, watching the sun climb over the mountains of this new land. Beyond the rock, the peninsula opens up. It is a land of diverse climates and landscapes, a patchwork quilt of environments waiting to be stitched together. To the north, The snow-capped peaks of the Sierra Nevada gleam white against the blue sky, a promise of water that will one day feed the fountains of Granada. To the west, the endless rolling hills of the Algarve covered in cork trees. To the east, the dry salt-crusted plains of Murcia. It is a land that has been asleep, I know way, dreaming of its past glory under Rome. It is a land waiting for a gardener. The Visigoths, the current rulers, are far away. Their kingdom is fractured, riven by civil war and succession crises. They are like an old oak tree that has rotted from the inside. It still stands tall, but a strong wind is all that is needed to bring it down. But the wind that has arrived is not a destructive gale. It is a warm breeze, carrying seeds from the east. These seeds are not just physical seeds of plants, though they bring those to lemons, oranges, pomegranates, cotton, but seeds of knowledge. They bring the lost texts of Aristotle and Plato, translated into Arabic. They bring the knowledge of irrigation, of how to coax water from the reluctant earth and make the desert bloom. They bring a love for poetry, for the intricate geometry of tiles, for the music of the oud. Let us drift inland now, floating like a spirit over the landscape. We move past the coastal fortifications over the dry hills. We see a shepherd tending his flock of gaunt sheep. He leans on his staff, watching a hawk circle in the thermal currents high above. The silence here is... There is no sound of industry, no roar of machines. Only the bleating of sheep, thuned in the dry grass, and the distant tolling of a bell from a small, stone chapel. The light is harsh, bleaching the color from the stones. The shadows are pools of ink. It is a stark, beautiful, lonely world as we move further north. Towards the city of Cordoba, the landscape changes slightly. The Guadalquivir River widens, its banks lined with reeds and willow trees. The Romans built a bridge here, a magnificent structure of 16 arches that spans the water. It is old now, its stones weren't smoothed by centuries of cartwheels and sandals, but it still stands, strong and defiant. The city it leads to is quiet. The streets are narrow and winding, providing shade from the sun. The houses are simple, built of stone and brick, turning inward away from the street, center rather in small, private courtyards. This architectural silence is about to be filled with the sound of fountains. The concept of the courtyard, the riad, is about to be elevated to an art form, but for now, the courtyards are dry. They are waiting for the engineers who understand the hydraulics of water, who know how to channel the mountain streams through aqueducts and clay pipes, to bring the precious liquid into the heart of the home. They are waiting for the sound of trickling water, the sound that will become the heartbeat of Al-Andalus. The sun climbs to its zenith. The heat presses down on the land. In the shade of an olive tree, Al-Azad scuttles over a warm stone, its skin flashing emerald green. A cicada starts its song, a high-pitched vibration that cuts through the heavy air. The world is in a siesta, a pause in the day when the heat makes work impossible. It is a time of rest, of stillness. It is in this stillness that we find the true potential of this land. It is a canvas that has been prepared with a base coat of Roman order and Visigothic hardiness. Now, it is ready for the pigments are being mixed across the straight. The brushes are being ready. The artist is standing at the door. The transition will not be instant. History is slow, like the growth of a tree. It takes years for theories to take hold, for the sap to rise. But the moment of contact has happened. The foot has stepped onto the sand. The wind from Africa has blown across the water and touched the face of Europe. The air has changed. Can you feel it? A subtle shift in the pressure. A new scent on the breeze. The smell of rain coming to a dry land. As the sun begins to set on this first day of the new era, the light softens again. The harsh white glare of midday gives way to a honey-colored glow that bathes the hills in gold. The shadows lengthen, stretching out like fingers grasping for the east. The temperature drops, and a cool breeze picks up, rustling the leaves of the cork oaks. The first stars appear, faint pinpricks in the deepening blue. The men on the beach at Gibraltar light their fires again. The flames dance in the darkness, casting flickering shadows on the limestone cliffs. They boil their tea, the sweet, minty steam rising into the night air. They talk of their homes in the Atlas Mountains, of their families, of the long journey that brought them here. They do not know that they are the vanguard of a golden age. They do not know that their children and their children's children will build palaces of Sukboti, that poets will weep at the sight of them. They do not know that in this land, they will calculate the circumference of the earth, map the stars, and perform surgery while the rest of Europe sleeps in a dark age. They only know the cool sand beneath them, the taste of the hot tea, and the sound of They are the seeds, waiting in the soil of the night. And as they sleep, the history of Thewald turns a page, slowly, quietly. with the rustle of a silk robe and the scratch of a pen. Their garden is waiting. The sun in Cordoba feels different than the sun in Damascus. In the east, the light is a piercing white, a heat that seems to vibrate with the intensity of the desert. Here, in the valley of the Guadalquivir, the light is softer, filtered through the humidity of the river and the dust of the olive. It is a golden, heavy light, like honey poured over bread. It was under this light, in the year 756, that a man sat alone on the banks of the river, staring into the muddy, swirling water. His name was Abd al-Rahman, and he was the last of his line. A prince of the Umayyad dynasty who had fled the slaughter of his family in Syria. He was known as the Falcon of the Quraysh, but in this quiet moment, he did not look like a predator. He looked like a man trying to plant his feet in shifting sand. He wore the simple robes of a traveler, the hem stained with the red dust of the road. His hands, once accustomed to the smooth parchment of royal decrees and the cool silk of courtly life, were now calloused from the reins of a horse and the hilt of a sword. He sat in the shade of a wild poplar tree, the leaves rustling above him like the whispering of ghosts. The river flowered past, indifferent to his history. It carried fallen leaves, twigs, and the occasional feather of a hawk. To the locals, this water was just a resource, a way to wash clothes or water cattle. To Abd al-Rahman, water was memory. He closed his eyes and listened to the sound of the current. In the darkness of his mind, the muddy Guadalquivir transformed into the crystal fountains of Thebarada River in Damascus. He could hear the splash of water on marble, the laughter of his brothers, the rustle of palm fronds in the palace gardens, sounds that were now silenced forever lost to the sword and the fire. He opened his eyes. The vision dissolved. He was here, at the edge of the known world. If he was to survive, if he was to build a sanctuary for his lineage, he could not live in the past. He had to bring the past here. He had to graft the elegance of the East onto the sturdy, wild rootstock of the West. This was the catalyst. Not a war, not a decree, but a deep, aching longing for home that will drive a man to reshape the very landscape itself. The transformation began with the water. The Romans, with their engineering genius, had built great aqueducts, but many had fallen into disrepair, their arches broken like teeth. The land was thirsty. The rain in Iberia is fickle. It comes in torrents in the winter and vanishes in the summer, leaving the earth cracked and hard. Abd al-Rahman and the engineers who gathered around him, men from Syria, from Egypt, from the local Visigothic population, began to look at Thuriver not as a boundary, but as a bloodline. They began to build the Imagine the construction of a great water wheel. It starts with thuwood. Massive trunks of cedar and oak are hauled to the riverbank. The air is filled with the scent of sawdust, a sharp, clean smell that cuts through the humid river air. Carpenters, their brows slick with sweat, work with adzes and chisels, shaping the wood into curved paddles and sturdy. There is a rhythm to their work, a percussion of wood on wood, metal on wood. Thud, thud, scrape. Thud, thud, scrape. They join the pieces not with iron nails that would rust in seawater, but with intricate joinery, pegs of hard olive wood driven into tight holes. When the wheel is finished, it is a giant, standing 30 feet high. Raising it is a feat of collective effort. Ropes are thrown over the high branches of trees. Men haul and heave, their muscles straining, their feet slipping in the mud. Slowly, with a groan of timber that sounds like a living beast waking up, the wheel rises. It is lowered into the stone channels, cut into the riverbank. The current catches the paddles. There is a moment of hesitation, a shudder, and then movement. The wheel begins to turn. Creak, splash, creak, splash. It is a slow, mournful, steady sound. The wooden buckets attached to the rim dip into the river, fill with water, rise up towards the sky, and tip their contents into the aqueduct above. The water glitters in the sun as it falls, a silver chain linking the river to the land. This sound, the groaning of the Noria, becomes the heartbeat of the countryside. It never stops. Day and night, it lifts the river, defying gravity. Carrying life to dry fields above. With the water came the change in the earth. The dry, red dust of the plains, once only good for wheat and olives, was suddenly introduced to a constant, regulated moisture. The water flowed through narrow channels, the acequias which were dug by hand, winding through the fields like earth lines on a palm. The soil drank it in, turning dark and rich, and into this prepared earth their newcomers placed strange seeds and saplings brought from the far ends of the Mediterranean. Imagine the planting of the first pomegranate tree. The sapling is small, fragile, its roots wrapped in wet burlap. A gardener, perhaps a local man learning the new ways, kneels in the mud. He digs a hole, crumbling the soil with his fingers to ensure it is fine and loose. He places the tree gently, covering the roots, patting the earth down with a tenderness usually reserved for children. He knows that he may not eat the fruit of this tree, but his children will. He waters it from Thesaquia, the water pooling around the thin trunk before sinking deep. Soon, the landscape began to blush with new colors. The deep, glossy green of the orange tree, the delicate pink blossoms of the almond, the vibrant yellow of the lemon. The air, once smelling gunly of dust and dry grass, began to carry new perfumes. In the spring, the scent of orange blossoms as a har became so thick it felt like a physical weight. A sweet, intoxicating fog that drifted through the open windows of the city. It was the smell of civilization, of nature tamed and courted into beauty. But the most poignant planting was not a crop for food, but a tree for the soul. History tells Ustad Abdi Rahman in his solitude, ordered the planting of a single date palm in the Garden Office Palace in Cordoba. The date palm is a creature of the desert, a symbol of the East. It does not belong in the wetter, cooler climate of Europe. Yet, he insisted, imagine the prince standing before this young tree. It is the only one of its kind in all of Spain. He sees himself in it. He writes a poem, the words falling from his lips like dry leaves. A palm tree stands in the middle of Rustafa, born in the west, far from the land of palms. I said to it, how like me you are, far away and in exile, in long separation from family and friends. You have sprung from soil in which you are a stranger, and I, like you, am far from home. This melancholy, this poetic sadness, was the mortar that held the new society together. It was not a conquest of brute force, but a conquest of emotion and culture. The people of Spain, the Visigoths, the Hispano-Romans, the Jews watched this transformation. They saw the water flowing, they tasted the sweet flesh of the new fruits, they heard the poetry, and slowly their barriers began to erode. In the city of Cordoba, the walls of the buildings began to change. The heavy, blocky stone of the Visigoths, built for defense and durability, began to be adorned with something lighter. The horseshoe arch, a shape that curves inward at the bottom, narrowing before it widens, began to appear. It is a shape that suggests an embrace, a keyhole looking into something hidden. The masons working with limestone and brick learned to alternate the colors red brick, white stone, red brick, white stone. This striped pattern, striking and rhythmic, created a visual vibration, making the heavy stone seem to float. The sounds of the city changed. The church bells still rang, heavy and iron-tongued, marking canonical hours. But now, weaving through them, was the adhan, the call to prayer. At first it was strange to the locals, a rising and falling vocal melody that seemed to cry out to the sky. But over the years, it became part of the texture of the day, a sound as natural as the rooster in the morning or the crickets at night. The two sounds did not fight. They existed in parallel layers, occupying the same air. In the marketplaces, the souk, the language began to shift. It was a slow alchemy. A merchant selling leather might use the Latin word for hide, but the Arabic word for tanning. A mother scolding her child might use a Visigothic sentence ending with an Arabic term of endearment. A new dialect was forming, a bridge of words known as The market stalls were pallid high with goods that reflected this mixture. There were heavy wool cloaks next to sheer silks from the Levant. There were crucifixes carved from ivory next to lamps inscribed with verses from the Quran. The catalyst was not just in the grand gestures, but in the quiet intimacy of daily life. It was in the introduction of glass. Before, people drank from pottery or metal, opaque vessels that hid the liquid within. The artisans from the East brought the secret of blowing glass, taking a gather off molten sand, glowing orange like a trapped sun, and breathing into it, expanding it into a delicate, transparent bubble. Now, a man could hold a goblet and see the wine or water inside, catching the light. It changed the way people looked at the world. It introduced a fragility, a clarity, a focus on light and transparency that would come to define Andalusian aesthetics. And let us not forget the paper. Parchment, made from animal skin, was expensive, heavy. It was for kings and bishops. But from the East came the knowledge of making paper from flax and rags. It was a messy, smelly process, soaking the rags in vats, beating them into a pulp, spreading the slurry onto wire mesh frames to dry. The smell of wet pulp hung over certain quarters of the city. But the result was a revolution. Suddenly, writing surface was cheap. A thought didn't need to be eternal to be written down. A recipe, a love letter, a calculation, a sketch, these could now be captured. The mind of the city began to expand, spilling onto thousands of sheets of paper. Abd al-Rahman, I grew old. His hair turned the color of the ash in the hearth. The young palm tree in his garden grew tall, its fronds casting a jagged shadow on the courtyard tiles. He had spent this life fighting to hold this land, to keep the fractious tribes and the jealous kingdoms at bay. As he sat in his palace, now a sprawling complex of rooms and gardens. He must have realized that his true victory was not on the battlefield. It was in the evening breeze that blew through the arches. The breeze was cooler now, tempered by the thousands of trees he and his people had planted. It carried the moisture of the acequia sand, the scent of the jasmine that climbed the walls. The harsh, dry skeleton of the Roman ruin had been clothed in a living, breathing garment of green dot. The sun sets on the first generation of land. The sky turns a bruised purple, and their swallows dive and swoop over the river, hunting the insects that rise from the water. Lamps aerolit in the houses, clay lamps filled with olive oil, the wicks sputtering before burning with a steady yellow flame. The city of Cordoba glows in the twilight, a constellation of fallen stars on the dark plain. The silence of the night settles in. It is a different silence than before. It is not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of a library after the readers have gone, or a garden after the birds have roosted. It is a silence full of potential. The roots are deep now. The graft has taken, the sap is rising. The catalyst has done its work, and now the golden age begins to bloom. The dream of exile has become the reality of the land. And as the moon rises, reflected in the still water of the garden pool, the palm tree stands watch, a sentinel of the east and the heart of the west, whispering stories to the wind. The dawn in Cordoba arrives, not with a shout, but with a whisper of light that touches the tops of minarets first. It is the year 850, or perhaps 900. The exact date dissolves in the timeless routine of the city. The sky transitions from the deep, velvety charcoal of night to a pale, translucent violet. In the narrow streets below, the shadows are still heavy and cool, clinging to the base of the whitewashed walls. The city is waking up. Unlike the muddy, dark hamlets of northern Europe, where sunrise brings the smell of damp thatch and livestock, Cordoba wakes to the scent of jasmine and whetstone. The streets here are paved. It is a marvel that travelers from the north can scarcely believe. Miles of smooth flagstones, swept clean by an army of municipal workers before the first merchant opens his shutters. Walk with me down one of these streets. Feel the solidity of the ground beneath your feet. There is no mud to suck at your sandals, no puddles of refuse. The stones are cool, retaining the chill of the night. Down the center of the street runs a small, neat channel, a miniature aqueduct that carries away the waste, flushed by the diverted waters of the mountains. It is a city that breathes, a city that cleans itself. Overhead, the iron brackets protruding from the walls hold glass lamps. They are dark now, their oil spent from the night before, but they stand as silent witnesses to a miracle. Street lighting. In a world where night meant absolute, terrifying darkness, Cordoba pushes back the void, creating a canopy of light that allows scholars to walk home from the library long after the sun has set. As the light bleeds down the walls, the city begins to hum. It is a low, rhythmic sound, the collective heartbeat of 500,000 souls. We are drawn towards the center, towards the river, towards the great stone magnet that anchors the spiritual life of Al-Andalus, the great mosque, the Mezquita. Approaching it, the first thing you notice is not the size, but the smell. The air around the mosque is perfumed with orange blossoms. The courtyard of the oranges, the Patio de los Naranjos, acts as a sensory airlock, a transition zone between the profane noise of the street and the harpsichord silence of the prayer hall. The trees are arranged in a grid, mirroring the columns inside. Irrigation channels connect each tree, a silver grid of water reflecting the leaves. You stop here, you wash your hands and face in the fountain. The water is cold, shocking the skin, sharpening the mind. The splash of the water is the only sound, echoing off the high outer walls. Now you step across the threshold into the mosque itself. The transition is disorienting. Your eyes, accustomed to the bright Iberian sun, must adjust to the dim, amber gloom. As your pupils dilate, the forest emerges. It is not a forest of wood, but of stone. Hundreds upon hundreds of columns stretch out in every direction, a dizzying, infinite grid that seems to have no beginning, then no end. These columns are the ghosts of the past, repurposed. Some are smooth, pale marble from Roman temples. Others are speckled granite, dark onyx, or red jasper. They are of differentities, scavenged from the ruins of empires, but the architects have harmonized them. They sit in varying bases, buried or raised, to align perfectly at the top. And from these tops spring the arches. The arches, they are not simple. They are double-tiered, a stroke of engineering genius to raise the ceiling without losing stability. The lower arch is a horseshoe, the upper a semicircle. They are striped red brick and white stone. Red and white, red and white. The pattern repeats endlessly, creating a visual vibration that makes the heavy stone seem to shimmer, to float. It looks like a canopy of palm fronds, a petrified oasis frozen in time. The air inside is cool and still. It carries the scent of old incense, burnt aloe wood, and the wax-oft thousands of candles. The floor is covered in woven mats of esparto grass and carpets from Persia, softening the sound of footsteps. You can hear the murmur of prayer, a low drone that weaves through the forest of stone. But you also hear other sounds, the whisper of debate, the rustle of pages. For this is not just a place of worship, it is a place of learning. In the corners, under the flickering light of hanging lamps, circles of students sit around bearded masters, discussing law, grammar, and the nature of the divine. The mosque is the living room of the city, but we leave the cool sanctuary and step back into the glare of the day. The heat is rising. It is to retreat to another sanctuary, one of the body rather than the soul, the hammam, the bathhouse. In Northern Europe, bathing is a rare suspicious occurrence, often feared as a weakening of Thibody. Here, it is a ritual, a social necessity, a cornerstone of civilization. There are hundreds of bathhouses in Cordoba, identifiable by the star-shaped vents in their domed roofs that let out steam. You enter through a heavy wooden door into the changing room. The noise of the city vanishes, replaced by the sound of dripping water and the echo of voices bouncing off wet tile. You undress, leaving your dusty clothes in a niche. You wrap a simple white cloth around your waist and step into the first room, the cold room. The air is crisp. You linger only a moment before moving to the warm room, the tepidarium. This is the heart of the bath. The air is warm and moist, relaxing the muscles. The light filters through the star-shaped glass in the dome above, casting beams of colored light, blue, amber, green that dance in the steam. The walls are lined with geometric tiles, a kaleidoscope of order and beauty. Men sit on marble benches, scrubbing their skin with rough mitts, washing away the grit of the streets. Conversations float in the mist, deals are struck, gossip is exchanged, poetry is recited. The water flows constantly from lion-headed spouts into marble basins, a perpetual, soothing gurgle. Finally, the hot room. The heat here is intense, generated by furnaces beneath the floor. The steam is thick, obscuring vision. You sweat. You sweat out the dust, the stress, the toxins of Thessaly. You lie on a heated stone slab, feeling the warmth penetrate deep into your bones. It is a state of suspension, a liquid sleep where the boundaries of the body seem to dissolve into the steam. Emerging from the bath, scrubbed, massaged, and anointed with oils of jasmine and rose, the citizen of Cordoba is ready for the evening. And the evening belongs to Ziraba. Ziraba is not a king nor a general. He is a musician, a poet, an arbiter of taste who arrived from Baghdad and changed the soul of Al-Andalus forever. He is the blackbird. Imagine him holding court in a salon lined with silk cushions. He holds an oud, the lute of the Arabs, but he has added a fifth string to it, a red string, which he says represents the soul. When he plays, the room falls silent. The notes are complex, emotional, sliding between the tones in a way that mimics the human voice. He does not just play melodies, he weaves moods. But Zarab's influence stretches far beyond music. He looks at the heavy, chaotic way that people eat all the food piled on the table at once and shakes his head. He introduces the concept of, first, the soup, warm and savory to prepare the stomach, then, the main dish of meat or fish, finally, the sweet dessert. It is a rhythm of dining, a civilized progression. He looks at their heavy gold and silver goblets that obscure the wine and replaces them with crystal. Look, Hesses, drink the light. He dictates the fashion. Why wear heavy wool in the summer, he asks. He teaches the courtier wear white linen in the heat, light and airy, and two-layered dark silks and furs in the winter. He introduces toothpaste to sweeten the breath, and deodorants to sweeten the body. He brings vegetable asparagus, a strange, spindly green stalk, and teaches the cooks how to steam it until it is tender. Under his tutelage, the rough edges of the frontier society are polished smooth. Life becomes an art form. To eat, to dress, to speak, to listen, everything is done with intention, with elegance. The clash of civilizations here is not a clash of swords, but a blending of ingredients in a pot. The olive oil of Rome mixes with the spices of the East. The Visigothic stew is served in a crystal bowl. As night fully descends, the scholars return to their work. In a small room overlooking a garden, a man sits at a desk. His name is unknown to us, just one of thousands of copyists. The room is quiet, save for the chirping of crickets outside. He dips a reed pen into an inkwell. The ink is black, made from soot and gum arabic, thick and permanent. He pulls a sheet of paper towards him, that miraculous smooth paper. He is copying a translation of Dioscorides, an ancient Greek text on botany and medicine. The original Greek was lost to the West, but it survived in the East, was translated into Arabic, and has now arrived in Cordoba. The copyist writes in a fluid cursive script. The letters loop and flow, connecting to one another like a river. He draws a diagram of a plant, detailing the root structure, the leaf shape. He is not just copying shapes. He is preserving knowledge. He possessed to trim the nib of his pen with a small knife. The sound is a sharp snick in the silence. He works late into the night. He knows that tomorrow, this book will go to the library, to join hundreds of thousands of others. He does not know that in 500 years, a monk from Paris or Oxford will travel here, desperate to find this very book, to relearn what was forgotten. He only knows the scratch of the pen, the smell of the ink, and the satisfaction of the page filling with words. The city outside settles into a deep slumber. The street lamps flicker and burn low. The water in the fountains continues to splash, a lullaby that never ends. The watchmen walk the walls, looking out over the dark plains. But there are no armies approaching tonight. There is only the wind, rustling the palm trees, carrying the scent of the orange blossoms up to the stars. The culture is approaching its zenith. The roots have taken hold, the trunk has grown thick and strong, and the branches are spreading wide. But the fruit, the true sweet fruit of this civilization, is yet to fully ripen. That belongs to the caliphs. That belongs to the golden age of the mind. For now, we rest in the comfort of the bath, the beauty of the song, and the safety of the paved, lit streets. We rest in the knowledge that we are in the center of the world, the ornament of the age. The silence of the library of Al-Hakam II is heavier than the silence of the desert. It is a denser Tyburn, not of emptiness, but of presence. Imagine standing in the center of a hall so vast that the ceiling is lost in the shadows above. You are surrounded by the scent of curing leather, of drying ink, of papyrus dust, and the faint, sweet smell of cedarwood shelves. This is not merely a room, it is a city of paper. In the year 961, while the kings of the north are likely illiterate, signing their names with a crude X, the Caliph Al-Hakam II sits in Cordoba, surrounded by 400,000 volumes. Run your hand along the spine of a book on the nearest shelf. The leather is dyed a deep royal crimson, embossed with gold leaf that catches the flickering light of the oil lamps. The binding is tight, the craftsmanship impeccable. This particular volume traveled from Baghdad, carried in a saddlebag across burning sands, guarded by men who would sooner lose their lives than this collection of words. It is a commentary on Aristotle, or perhaps a treatise on astronomy. The specific topic matters less than the sheer, overwhelming fact of its existence. In this room, the wisdom of the world has been gathered, catalogued, and given a home. The Caliph himself is often found here. He is a man of quiet intensity, his eyes tired from reading by candlelight, his fingers stained with ink. He does not prowl the battlefield like a lion. He prowls catalogue like a hungry ghost. He sends agents, book hunters out into the world with bags of gold and a single command: bring me knowledge. They scour the markets of Cairo, Damascus, and Constantinople. They bribe librarians, haggle with merchants, and unearth crumbling scrolls from forgotten monasteries. When a caravan arrives in Cordoba, the Caliph does not ask about silks or the spices. He asks, "What books have you brought?" There is a specific sound in the library, the soft thump of a heavy book being placed on a reading desk. The desks are made of polished walnut, slanted at the perfect angle to catch the light. Ascalon sits there, a man with a white beard and a turban of fine linen. He is reading a text on. He pauses, his brow furrowed, and reaches for his own pen. He makes a note in the margin, a respectful disagreement with the author, a conversation across centuries. His marginalia is the pulse of the library. It is the evidence that the books are not dead artifacts, but living participants in an endless debate. But the library is only the repository. The engine of this intellectual empire is the scriptorium. Let us walk down the corridor to the copying rooms. Here, the silence gives way to a gentle, industrious hum. And here, we see something that would shock a visitor from many other lands. Women. There are 170 women employed here, not as servants, but as they are the guardians of the script. Watch one of them at work. Her name is Lubna. She sits on a low cushion, her posture straight, her concentration absolute. She is copying a volume of poetry. Her hand moves with a fluid, practiced grace, the reed pen dancing across the paper. She does not just write, she illuminates. She dips a fine brush into a pot of crushed lapis lazuli, painting a delicate blue border of vines and flowers around the text. Then, she takes a sheet of gold leaf, thin as breath. She breathes on the page to make it tacky, then lays the gold down, burnishing it with a smooth agate stone until it shines like a mirror. She is creating beauty that will outlast her own life. The intellectual energy of Cordoba is not confined to paper. It spills out into the physical world, into the bodies of the people. We must leave the library now and travel a few miles west of Thessaly to the glittering palace city of Madin. Here, in a wing of the palace dedicated to healing, lives a man named Al-Zarawi. The West will later call him a Bol. He is the father of surgery, and his workshop is a place of quiet revolution. The room is clean, obsessively so. The floors are washed with vinegar and rosewater. The light here is bright, streaming in through large windows to illuminate the tables. Al-Zarawi stands over a display of instruments. They are terrifying and beautiful scalpels, bone saws, forceps, cautery irons. But they are not crude tools of torture. They are refined, designed by Al-Zarawi himself, forged from the finest steel. He picks one up, a small, curved hook. He tests the balance in his hand. He is writing a book, Altasrif, an encyclopedia of medicine that will be used in Europe for 500 years. Today, he is treating a patient with a deep wound. In the past, or in other lands, such a wound might be sewn with silk that harbors rot, or left to fester. But Al-Zarawi has observed nature. He has watched a monkey eating the strings of a musical instrument made from sheep and he noticed that the body digests the material. So, he has spun the intestine into a fine thread catgut. He works with steady, gentle hands. He cleans the wound with alcohol, a substance distilled by the chemists of Cordoba. He threads the needle with the cat. He stitches the flesh. He knows that he will not need to cut these stitches out later. They will dissolve, absorbed by the body as if it is a mercy. It is a miracle of observation. The patient watches him, fear melting into. The surgeon does not chant spells. He trusts in anatomy and technique. He finishes, wipes his hands, and turns back to his manuscript to draw a diagram of the procedure. This spirit of inquiry extends beyond the Muslims. We must walk now into the garden of Hasdaban. He is a Jew, the Nasi prince of his community, and the right-hand man to the caliph. In Al-Andalus, the wall between faiths is not a fortress. It is a garden fence. Hasdai is a physician, a diplomat, and a patron of the arts. His garden is a sanctuary of botany. He walks along a gravel path, the stones crunching softly under his sandals. He is accompanied by a monk from Byzantium named Nicholas. They are speaking in Greek, a language Hasdai learned just so he could translate a gift from the Byzantine emperor, a magnificent, illustrated copy of Dioscorides de Materia Medica. The book had arrived months ago, a treasure of ancient knowledge. But the plant names were in Greek dialects unknown to the Arabs. So, the Caliph called Hasdai. Now, the Jewish scholar and the Christian monk walk together, stopping to examine a living plant in the garden, perhaps a mandrake or a poppy. Nicholas points to the leaves, speaking the Greek name. Hasdai nods, his mind racing to find the Arabic equivalent, or the Latin, or the Hebrew. They are solving a puzzle. They are unlocking a text that will save lives. There is no animosity, only the shared pursuit of truth. They sit on a marble bench, the great green book open between them. The monk points to an illustration of a root. In Constantinople, we use this forpen, he says. Hasdai translates, his pen scratching on a separate sheet. Here, he replies, where Have used it for sleep, but the dosage is tricky. They debate, they compare, they learn. This is conventional coexistence. It is not a utopia. There are tensions, there are laws that separate, but in the garden of knowledge, the hierarchy dissolves. There is only the plant, the ailment, and the cure. The sun moves across the sky, casting long shadows over the garden. The air is filled with the buzzing of bees, nature's own alchemists, turning nectar into honey. Hasdai watches them. He thinks about the translation he is overseeing. He realizes that they are like these bees, gathering nectar from every flower, Greek, Indian, Persian, Roman, and turning it into the honey of Andalusian culture. It is a sweet, golden substance, rich and preserving. Let us pan out from the garden. Rising above the walls of the palace, we see the city of Cordoba stretching out, a sea of tiled roofs and white walls. We see the smoke rising from the kilns of thepaters who are discovering how to make lusterware, ceramics that shine with a metallic iridescent glaze. We see the astronomers on the roofs, setting up their astrolabes as the first stars appear. The astrolabe. Let us focus on this object for a moment. It is a model of the universe that you can hold in your hand. Brass plates, intricately engraved with the positions of the stars, stack and a man stands on a rooftop, holding the instrument up to his eye. He aligns the sight with the North Star. He turns the dial. He is calculating the time, the latitude, the direction off Mecca. He is locating himself in the cosmos. He is not afraid of the vastness of the sky. He measures it. He names the stars, Aldebaran, Altair, Beetle, Rigel. These names will travel north, crossing the Pyrenees, entering the language of French and German, where they will remain forever. A celestial legacy of this Timid place. The night deepens. The city does not go dark. The oil lamps are lit again, the stars of the earth mirroring the stars of the sky. In the scriptorium, Lubna finishes her page. She blows gently on the gold leaf to remove a speck of dust. She closes the book. In the clinic, Al-Zarawi washes his instruments and lays them out on a velvet cloth for the morning. In the palace, Al-Hakum finally extinguishes his candle, his eyes heavy but his spirit full. There is a sense of fullness in this era, a rightness. It feels as though civilization has reached a plateau of perfection. The water flows, the crops grow, the books are written, the bodies are eaten. It is a moment of balance, a suspended breath, but history is a wheel, and the wheel must turn. In the shadows of this brilliance, other forces are stirring. To the north, the Christian kingdoms are coalescing, hungry and hardened by to the south, in the deserts of Africa, a new, more fundamentalist wind is gathering, one that views the luxuries and philosophical musings of Cordoba with suspicion. And within Thepelest itself, the seeds of decay are always hidden in the fruit of success. The Caliph is old. He has no air of age. The intellectual paradise he has built is fragile, held tugged by his will and the respect he commands. When he is gone, the library will remain, but will the wisdom. The paper is durable, but is the tolerance. We linger here in the candlelight for one last moment, cherishing the quiet scratching of the pens, the smell of the books, the gentle splash of the fountains. We are in the golden hour of the golden age. The sun is setting, and Theklas are at their most vibrant, their most heartbreakingly beautiful, just before the dark. Drift now. Let the image of the library fade. Let the sound of the water wheel slow down in your mind. You are walking through the corridors of time, touching the stone walls, feeling the cool night air. The knowledge is safe for now. The story is written. The stars are named. Sleep in the comfort of this achievement. Rest in the garden of the mind. The sun has reached its zenith. In the arc of history, as in the arc of the day, there is a moment when the shadows are shortest, the light is brightest, and the world seems to hold its breath in a state of suspended perfection. In Al-Andalus, this moment is made of stone and gold. It is the 13th century, and the emirate has become a caliphate. No longer content to be a distant fragment of the Islamic world, Cordoba has declared itself the center, the spiritual and political axis of the earth. To manifest this claim, to prove it to the sky and the soil, the Caliph Abd al-Rahman III decides to build not just a palace, but a city. He calls it Madinat al-Zahra, the shining city, the city of the flower dot. It sits on the gentle slopes of the Sierra Morena, a few miles west of Cordoba, facing the fertile Ivory of the Guadalquivir. It is a stage set for the theater of power, carved into the side of the mountain in 3 descending terraces. To understand the sheer, overwhelming magnitude of this place, you must not look at it from a distance. You must walk the road that leads to its gates. Imagine you are a traveler, perhaps an ambassador from the cold, grey courts of the German Emperor Otto. You have traveled for months through rain and mud, through dark forests and drafty castles, and now, you stand on a paved road, smooth as a table, surrounded by a landscape that looks like a dream of paradise. The air here is different. It vibrates with the heat, but it is sweetened by the scent of miles of almond and orange trees that line the approach. You can hear the sound of water before you see a constant, low thrumming, like the purring of a great cat. It is the sound of aqueducts or fountains, of channels rushing with snowmelt brought down from the mountains. As you approach the walls, you realize they are not just fortifications. They are canvases. The stone is a blinding white, quarried from the local hills, but it is cut with such precision that the joints are almost invisible. It looks as if the city has been carved from a single, massive block of ivory. Entering the lower terrace, the city of the servants and the soldiers, you are met with an assault of order. In the chaotic cities of the north, streets are tangled webs of mud and refuse. Here, their streets are laid out in a grid, paved with stone, washed clean every morning. You see Thabariks of the Caliph's guard, the Slavs, men of the north with pale eyes and golden hair, purchased and trained to be the elite protectors of the throne. They stand motionless in their chainmail, their polished helmets reflecting the sun, looking like statues of silver. There are thousands of them. The silence of their discipline is heavier than the noise of a shouting mob. You begin the ascent. The city is designed to force you to look up. As you climb to the middle terrace, the gardens unfold. These are not the wild, enclosed forests of the north. These are gardens of geometry. The bushes are trimmed into perfect spheres and cubes. The flower beds are laid out in intricate knots and stars, mirroring the tile patterns on the walls. Nature here has been tamed, educated, and brought to court. You walk past aviaries made of gold wire, where birds from Africa and India flash like living jewels, parrots of emerald green, finches of ruby red, their calls mix with the sound of the fountains, creating a surreal, musical atmosphere. And then, there is the zoo. A gasp escapes your throat. In a large sunken enclosure, lions from Atlas Mountains pace across the sand. Their coats are the color of the desert. They're monastic and dark. They stop and watch you with heavy, golden eyes. To a man from the north, a lioness, a mythical beast, a creature of heraldry and scripture. To see one breathing, smelling of musk and raw meat, lying in a garden in Spain, is to understand the reach of the Caliph. He commends not just men, but the beasts of the earth. He commands the south, the desert, the wild. You continue to climb. The air grows cooler, the architecture more refined. You are entering Thoipa Terrace, the domain of the spirit and the crown. The stone changes from simple limestone to marble, white marble from Espremos, pink marble from Cabra streaked with purple and blood-red veins. The columns here are delicate, slender as reed stalks, yet they support heavy arcs of intricate fretwork. The walls are covered in atteric arabesque carvings of vines and leaves so deep and complex that the stone seems to be soft, like molded clay or lace. You are led toward the reception hall. The Salon Rico. The doors are massive, plated in bronzed gold, carved with verses from the Quran that praise God and the Caliph. The metal is warm-toed, the touch, radiating the heat of the day. A chamberlain, dressed in silk robes that shimmer like an oil-slick purple, green, gold, opens the heavy doors. The light inside blinds you for a moment. The hall is open to the garden on one side, allowing the breeze to flow through. The ceiling is a masterpiece of cedar wood, carved and painted with gold stars mimicking the heavens. But it is the walls that capture your gaze. They are paneled in marble and gold, but high up, near the ceiling. They are pierced with windows of colored glass, crimson, azure, amber. The sun strikes these windows and paints the floor in pools of liquid color. You step onto the floor. It feels strange beneath your boots. You look down and realize you are not walking on stone, but on a carpet, a single immense carpet woven in the workshops of Cordoba, so thick and soft that your feet sink into it. The pattern is a garden, a mirror of the real garden, outside, so that it is difficult to tell where the weaving ends and the flowers begin. You are walking on a meadow of wool and silk. At the far end of the hall sits the Caliph. He is seated on a raised divan, surrounded by cushions. He is dressed in white, pure, blinding white. In a world of dyed fabrics, where color is wealth, the absence of color is the ultimate status. He wears no jewelry, only a single large ring. He sits motionless, a statue of flesh and blood. He does not speak. He does not need to. The silence in the room is absolute. It is a silence that presses against your ears, a silence made of 1,000 held breaths. But the true marvel, the detail that will haunt your dreams for the rest of your life, is in the center of the room. In front of the Caliph's seat is a large, shallow basin of polished marble. It appears to be empty, or perhaps filled with a strange, heavy water. As you approach, a servant lyrics the basin. The liquid inside moves. It is not water. It is mercury, quicksilver. The sunbeams from the high windows strike the rippling surface of the mercury. The room explodes with light. Flashes of brilliance dart across the walls and ceiling like lightning. It is a terrifying, awe-inspiring display. It looks as if the room is spinning, as if the solid stone is dissolving into light. The Caliph sits in the center of this maelstrom of brilliance, unblinking, illuminated by the divine fire. To the observer, he appears to be floating, a being of flight rather than earth. It is theater, yes, but it is theater of the highest order. It is a message. I hold the light. I command the sun. I am the shadow of God on earth. The audience is short. You are dismissed with a gesture. You back away, unable to take your eyes off the shimmering pool, the golden ceiling, the man in white. You retreat through the layers off city, down the marble steps, past the lions, past the soldiers, back to the dusty road. As you walk away, you turn back to look at the mountain. Madina al-Zahra glows in the late afternoon sun like a pearl set in emerald. It seems eternal, a structure that has always been and will always be. But let us linger here, in this moment of perfection. Let us step away from the politics and thepior and find a quiet corner in the gardens of the upper terrace. It is evening now. The mercury has settled into a mirror. The caliph has retired to his private chambers. The air is cooling, carrying the scent of jasmine and whetstone. A fountain trickles nearby, the water flowing over escalloped marble slab, creating a pattern that looks like fish scales. This is the climax of the civilization, not just because of the gold or the armies, but because of synthesis. Here in this garden, everything is connected. The water in the fountain is pumped by the science of the engineers. The poem recited by a courtier in the shadows is written according to the meters codified by the linguists. The song being played on a lute is tuned to thematics of the astronomers. The grapes on the silver platter are grown by the agricultural vonal of the botanists. That there is no separation between the sacred and the secular, between art and science, between art and architecture. It is all one melodious, intricate system. The horseshoe arch does not just hold up the roof. It frames the view of the sky, reminding the viewer of the infinite. The geometric tile pattern is not just decoration. It is a meditation on the unity of the cosmos. A visual prayer that has no beginning and no end. The night falls over the shining city. The lamps are lit, turning the white walls into glowing lanterns against the black mountain. From the valley below, the farmers look up and see. They tell their children that the stars have come down to rest on the hill. In the silence of night, the city feels invincible. It feels as though this golden age has achieved an escape velocity, that it has risen above the messy, bloody cycle of history. But history is patient. It waits in the cracks of the marble. It waits in the ambitions of the vizier Shah stand in the shadows of the caliph. It waits in the envy of the neighbors. The perfection of Madinat al-Zahra is its own fragility. It is a flower in full bloom, and the nature of a flower is that it cannot hold its petals forever. The very specific conditions that created this moment, the strong central ruler, the tolerance, the wealth, the isolation are already beginning to shift. Listen closely to the sound of the wind in the cypress trees. Is there a different note tonight? A slightly colder edge to the breeze coming from the north. The lions in the pit are sleeping but their breathing is heavy. The mercury in the basin is still, but it is a toxic substance, poisonous touch. The beauty is overwhelming, yes, but it is a beauty that demands absolute control, and control is the one thing that cannot be maintained forever. For now, though we simply watch. We watch the moon rise over the white city. We watch their reflection of the arches in the dark pools. We feel the cool marble beneath our hands. We breathe in the perfume of a civilization at its absolute peak. It is the year 960, or 970. The world is dark. But here, on this hillside in Spain, the lamp is burning with a brilliance that hurts the eyes. It is the high noon of a lamp. The shadow is directly underneath our feet, invisible, but it is there waiting. The wind has changed direction. For 300 years, it blew from the east, carrying the warmth of the desert and the scent of new beginnings. But now, in the early years of the 11th century, the wind blows from the north, cold and sharp, or it swirls in fitful gusts, unsure of its path. We return to the hill of Madinat al-Zahra, the shining city. The silence here is no longer the disciplined silence of the caliph's court. It is the heavy, thick silence of abandonment. The mercury basin is dry. The great cedar roof of the Salon Rico has fallen, its gold stars lying face down in the dust. The looters have come and gone, stripping the marble, the pearls, the silk, but nature, the patient gardener, has returned. A wild fig tree pushes its way through the cracked pavement of the reception hall, its roots twisting around the base of a broken column. Vines of ivy cascade down the white walls, green tears on a pale face. Swallows have built their nests in the intricate honeycomb of the arches, darting in and out of the shadows where viziers whispered state secrets. The destruction was not an erasure, but a scattering. The great unified caliphate shattered like a crystal vase dropped on a stone floor. It broke into 24 pieces, the Tifa's small, independent kingdoms, Seville, Toledo, Granada, Zaragoza. Each shard of glass still held a reflection of the original brilliance. The poets, the astronomers, and the architects did not vanish. They packed their satchels, rolled up their scrolls, and traveled. They found new patrons in these smaller courts. The grand monolithic sun of Cordoba had set, but in its place 1,000 stars appeared, twinkling in the twilight. Drift with me now to the city of Seville in the 11th century. The scale is smaller here. The rulers, the Abadids, no, they cannot match the raw power of the old caliphs. so they compete with beauty. They build the Alcazar. It is not a monument to art, but a monumento pleasure. Walk through the Patio de las Stanzas. The air is still and warm. In the center is a long, rectangular pool of water, sunken into the earth. It is a mirror, perfectly flat, reflecting the intricate plasterwork of the arches. Here, the conversation is hushed. A poet sits by the water's edge, dipping his hand into the cool liquid. He recites verses about the fleeting nature of power, about how life is like a shadow that passes over the grass. The music of the oud is softer, more melancholic. The walls are covered in geometric patterns that seem to dissolve the solidity of the stone. They are made of plaster, not marble, fragile, temporary, exquisite. It is an architecture that knows it is mortal. It accepts the coming night with a grace that is heartbreakingly beautiful. To the north, the tide is turning. The Christian kingdoms are pushing south, capturing city after city. But this conquest is strange. When the armies of Alfonso VI enter Toledo in 1085, they do not burn the library. They stand in awe before it. They realize that the treasure here is not gold, but the books. Enter the scriptorium of Toledo in the 12th century. It is a place of convergence. At a large oak table, two men sit side by side. One is a Mozarab, a Christian who grew up speaking Arabic. The other is a visiting scholar from the misty, rain-soaked lands of England or France. Between them lies a book, a translation of Ptolemy's Almagest, or perhaps the medical texts of Al-Zarawi. Listen to the sound of their work. The Mozarab reads the Arabic sentence aloud, translating it into the vernacular Castilian. The visitor listens, translates the Castilian into Latin in his head, and writes it down. Scritch, scratch, scritch. It is the sound of a bridge being built. Through this low, laborious friction of pens on parchment, the knowledge of the ancients preserved and expanded by the Muslims flows back into Europe. The Dark Ages are ending, illuminated by lamps of Allah. The names of the stars, the formulas of algebra, the anatomy of Thea, they are all migrating north, carried in saddlebags, destined to spark the Renaissance. Centuries roll by like clouds over the Meseta. The territory of Al-Andalus shrinks. It retreats south, backed against the mountains and the sea. By the 13th century, only one ember remains burning, the Kingdom of Granada. The setting here is dramatic. The Sierra Nevada mountains rise like a wall of white jagged teeth, their peaks covered in eternal snow. Nestled at their feet, on a red hill Alhambra, the redone sits the final palace. The Alhambra, this place is not a city, it is a jewelry box. It is the final, desperate, exquisite exhale of a dying. The Nasrid sultans who built it knew their time was limited. You can see it in everywhere you look. Carved into the stucco in elegant calligraphy is the phrase Wa la Ghalib, Ila Allah, there is no victor but God. It is a humble admission. Armies fail, walls crumble, dynasties end. Only the divine is permanent. Walk into the court of the lions. It is the hour of twilight. The tourists of the future are sent. For now, it is empty. 12 marble lions support a central fountain. They are not the fierce, naturalistic lions of Madina. They are stylized, stiff, almost cute. They spout water from their mouths, feeding for channels that divide the courtyard, symbolizing the 4 rivers of paradise. The architecture here has dissolved completely. The columns are impossibly thin. The architrave draped with muqarnas stalactite vaulting that looks like honeycomb or hanging lace. It is meant to catch the light and break it into 1,000 shadows. It is meant to look like the cave where the prophet received the revelation, or like the underside of a heaven made of sugar and light. The water here does not rush. It flows with a gentle, glass-like smoothness. It travels through channels cut into the marble floor, cooling the air. You can hear the water moving under your feet, a hidden circulatory system. The sensory experience is hypnotic. The smell of myrtle hedges, the sound of the trickle, the play of light on the tile mosaics. It is a place designed for dreaming, a fortress against the harsh reality of the world outside. But the world outside is persistent. It is 1492. The armies of Ferdinand and Isabella have surrounded the city. The siege has lasted for months. There is no food. The snow on the mountains mocks the hunger in the valley. The last sultan, Boabdil, looks out from the Torre della Vella. He sees the campfires of the Christians, a sea of lights in the darkness. He knows the end has come. The surrender is not a massacre. It is a ceremony of sorrow. On the 2nd day of January, the gates open. Boabdil rides out on a dark horse. He is dressed in black velvet. He carries the keisto, the Alhambra heavy, iron keys that have locked these gates for 250 years. He meets the Catholic monarchs by the river. He hands over the keys. He does not look them in the eye. God is great. he whispers, but his voice breaks. He turns his horse and begins the long ride south, towards the coast, towards exile in Africa. Legend says that at the mountain pass, he paused and looked back. He saw the red towers of the Alhambra gleaming in the winter sun, the cypresses standing like dark candles, the white snow of the mountains. He began to weep. His mother, Aisha, riding beside him, said the words that have echoed through history: "Do not weep like a woman for what you could not defend as Amen." But perhaps she was wrong. Perhaps he was weeping not for a kingdom, but for a world of beauty that was vanishing from the earth. The gates close. The cross is raised over the tower. The call to prayer is silenced, replaced by thurring of bells. The golden age is over, or is it? Stand in that same spot today, on the hill looking at the Alhambra. Close your eyes, listen. The water still flows in the channels. The orange trees in the courtyard still bear fruit, their scent filling the air every spring. The nightingale still sings in the general-leaf gardens. The legacy of Al-Andalus did not disappear. It dissolved into the groundwater of the world. Pick up a guitar. That shape, that waist, that sound hole. It is the grandchild of the oud of Zeryab strum chord, the Phrygian mode, the flamenco scale. It is the echo of the music played in the salons of Cordoba. Look at the language you speak. Say the word admiral. Amir al-Bihar, commander of the seas. Say algebra. Algebra, the reunion of broken parts. Say saffron, sugar, cotton, coffee. These are not just words. They are artifacts, little seeds of history that we carry in our mouths every day. Look at the night sky. Betelgeuse, Rigel, Deneb, Altair. The astronomers of Cordoba are still there, guiding the ships and the dreamers, their names written in light across the firmament. The story of Al-Andalus is a story of a garden. A garden is not a permanent thing. It requires work. It requires water. It requires love. Eventually the gardener dies, or the water runs dry, and the desert returns. But the seeds produced in that garden are carried by the wind. They fall in distant lands in Italy, in France, in the Americas. They sprout in unexpected places. The garden does not die. It migrates. And now, the journey is done. The long river of time has carried us from the Straits of Gibraltar to the peaks of Granada. The sun has finally set. The twilight has deepened into night. The air is cool and still. The only sound left is the sound of your own breathing, slow and steady, like the rhythm of the ocean. But the images fade. The red walls of the Alhambra soften into the darkness. The white columns of the mosque blur into the shadows. The gold of the manuscripts dims to a warm, comforting. You are no longer in the past. You are here, in the safety of the present, wrapped in the myth of your own bed. History is a heavy blanket, woven from the threads of a billion lives. Pull it up to your chin, feel the weight of it, comforting and secure. The conflicts are over. The treaties are signed. The books are shelved. The kings are sleeping in their stone tombs. The world is at rest. That there is nothing left to do. No more battles to fight. No more walls to build. No more words to write. The ink is dry. The candle is out. The garden is quiet. Sleep now. Sleep in the garden of the night. Sleep.